Welcome back to our next edition of the CBB Review Studio podcast. I am Dan Siegel, joined as always by my co-host Ben Anderson, and we are about 20 minutes removed from the second upset of a 16-1 in men's college basketball history. We are fresh off the press. This is an emergency podcast where we'll be discussing what just went down between Purdue and Fairliegh Dickinson. Ben, I mean, what do we say at this point?
Come on. That game was incredible in a way that I've never watched a basketball game be incredible. I think that first of all, let's give Fairleigh Dickinson and particularly head coach Tobin Anderson his flowers. Yeah. He devised if you know you only have a guy that is 6'7" that's going to be playing your 5 position when he's not in foul trouble, that's how you beat Purdue.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, this man last year and for the previous 10 years was coaching at a local Division II school in my county. I come from suburban New York. There are not a lot of basketball prestige in my area. And this man just takes over Fairleigh Dickinson. What they win 4 games last season?
They went 4 in 2022.
They went 4 in 22. Takes over. Yes, they didn't belong in the tournament. That's another conversation, but it doesn't matter. They were there and brilliant. I mean, the game plan that he had, Purdue was absolutely shook, and they basically had a lot of pressure in the backcourt, made Purdue speed up, did not allow Zach Edey to get the ball at all, and just forced Purdue shooters to make wide open threes. And what happened besides a couple of Fletcher Lawyer makes? Yeah.
Look, there was one shot. I believe it was like 10 minutes left. Mason Gillis just stood there for like 3 seconds. There was no one within 5 feet of him. He pulled it, and it just missed by 4 feet. It was caught before it even reached the rim on the y-axis. That was emblematic of the entire night for Purdue. They just couldn't get anything going from their guard play, and that's something we were worried about. If we're talking about Purdue as a legitimate contender to move forward in the tournament, that's especially what we were worried about moving forward towards Memphis in particular. But obviously it came a game early for them. And let's just talk about Anderson's decision to go press for 35 of the 40 minutes, probably something like that. 2 days after his team had to play in the first 4. So he's already more tired than Purdue is. And yet it was the right decision. And you could I don't know about you, but I was tearing my hair out for that section between probably the under 12 timeout and the under 4 timeout, where Purdue would break the press. They eventually figured it out. Braden Smith figured it out. They would get it to the middleman, whoever that was, maybe Ethan Morton or Fletcher Lawyer or sometimes Mason Gillis, and they would just slow it down.
Yeah.
Even though they had a 2-on-1 where the 5-man for Fairleigh Dickinson was fronting Zach Edey, all they had to do was throw it over their head.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that hindsight's 2020, but do you think that Purdue should have just eventually given up on their wide open 3-pointers and just found a way to, no matter how many guys were on Zach Edey, feed him and let him do his thing? Do you think there was a possible way to do that?
I think so. I mean, Zach Edey only had 2 turnovers over the game. And let's also say Zach Edey is not why Purdue lost.
No, not at all.
Zach Edey did everything he could. He had 21 and 15, only 2 turnovers. So it's not as if they were throwing the ball into him. He was getting doubled, bringing the ball down. He did that a couple of times, and he turned the ball over. But he only had 2 turnovers for the game. He got fouled exponentially more often than he turned the ball over. So I don't know why they just didn't. What they should have done probably is, in my opinion, is play first and Edey together, or Kaufman-Wren and Edey together, and just have bigs where you can just contract the court a little bit at least. I know they're not guarding from the 3. You just have to give him the ball. You give him the ball.
Yeah. And I mean, he missed a couple of bunnies early in the game, but I felt like there had to have been a way to get him going. And that's a coaching malfunction on Painter's part. That's just, I mean, it's inexcusable. And the next angle I want to go at before we get back into more of this gameplay was, you guys know us, or if you guys know us, Ben and I are Virginia fans. Ben is a Virginia student. Does it feel like you got a monkey off your back a little bit? I mean, Virginia just lost another upset loss to a 13 seed, and we will talk about that on the Monday episode. We'll talk about everything basically but this. But does it sort of feel like a monkey off your back, or are you in a way like extra sympathetic, empathetic towards these Purdue fans?
So it's a little bit hard of a question to answer because the monkey got off our back when we won the national title.
Also true.
Right? This is fresh in Purdue fans' minds, and I know how that feels. That sucks. But objectively, I think, and I'm speaking as a UVA student, as a UVA fan, I still think this is a bigger upset than UMBC over UVA. Fairleigh Dickinson was rated 299th in KenPom. UMBC was rated 188th, I believe, in KenPom when they played UVA in 2018. And I see some people on Twitter, some Purdue fans saying, no, but look, we weren't expected to win the national title. UVA was. They were a title contender. UVA was unranked to start that 2017-2018 season, just like Purdue was this year. It's not like they were some titan of the sport for the entire year, in my opinion. And when you combine that with the fact that Fairleigh Dickinson is only in on a technicality because Merrimack doesn't have D1 eligibility in the postseason yet, and they played the first four, like I do think that this is the biggest upset in the history of at least the tournament. Arguably college basketball, the only other one that comes to mind is Chaminade over Virginia back in the 80s. But objectively, it's funnier. Like the way it happened is so much funnier.
This is the shortest team in Division I. They mentioned it all over the broadcast. I think this is the first time mentioning it on this pod. The shortest team in average height in Division I basketball against Purdue, who is, I'm pretty sure, the tallest team in Division I. At the very least, they had
They're like 21st or something because their guards are short. But yeah. Still.
Yeah, and in effective height, which I think averages the 3, 4, and 5, I believe they were the tallest.
Mm-hmm.
So it's we're recording right after it. It's hard to even wrap my head around it. And even last night, there was a crazy thing that happened between Northern Kentucky and Houston, because Northern Kentucky and Houston, that one played out a lot like Virginia UMBC played out, or at least it should have played out a lot like Virginia UMBC played out, because there's the shot quality scores that we often make reference to, and that averages what the expected points are in every single possession based on the quality of the shot and who's taking the shot. And on an average Northern Kentucky and an average Houston night, Northern Kentucky would have won the game by 20. But that was a different way of upsetting them. That was just a good offensive team run by their guards getting outshot by a mid-major school. This was completely different. This was not a team that happened to shoot the lights out. I'm looking at the stats right now. 3-point percentage, 30.4 for Fairleigh Dickinson. They did not just get super hot. They out-defended Purdue.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, so if you watch the broadcast, this was brought up a ton. The Fairleigh Dickinson player named Sean Moore, he had the game of his life. He went for 19 points and 5 rebounds, but all over the broadcast it was mentioned, he's only a 27% three-point shooter. He's only a 27% three-point shooter. And that's why Zach Edey was on him the whole game. And it felt like he made every single shot he took because he just happened to make them at the most opportune times. But if you look at the box score, he was 3 for 10 from 3, right on average with his season averages. So again, to your point, it's not like this was some insane shooting performance. It was almost like an insane negative shooting performance from Purdue is how I would describe it, more than an insanely positive shooting performance from Fairleigh Dickinson.
Yeah, because look, Purdue was basically an over-exaggerated version of themselves this year. They obviously ran their entire offense through Zach Edey. They had poor guard play. It's not like it was like that the whole year where the guards couldn't shoot at all with wide open shots. the guards were not able to create their own shots, but because of Zach Edey and they got their wide open looks, they were usually able to create them. But Tobin Anderson knew his one chance, which is a very possible thing of happening, is to harass Zach Edey, not let him get the ball, and make them make wide open shots. Most of the time, 95% of the time, I feel like Purdue would make those shots, or at least enough shots, one or two more shots than they made. But that was the best chance of it happening. That was the best possible game plan. And it worked. And it
worked. And it deserved to work. Tobin Anderson, that's a coaching story that will live forever. This game will be talked about for decades. I saw a tweet to go back to your point about like how Purdue is ultra Purdue this year. It was Jessica Smetana. She tweeted out that Purdue is like if you ask ChatGPT to form a Big Ten team. And like that's the most accurate way of describing this year's Boilermaker team. They're just a character. They were a caricature of themselves in this game. And I think that it came back to bite them. It would have bit them anyway. At worst, at best, I think they were at a Sweet 16 team. Like I think they would have fell to either Duke or Tennessee, whoever won that game, if they got past Memphis or FAU to begin with. But like, man, what a way to go out.
Wow.
What a way to go out.
Yeah. How does it – no, I feel like I can't ask this question because both of us were on the losing side of the previous 16-1. Because what I was trying to ask is how it felt, how it resonated in your mind compared to the first time, and whether it was any different, whether the shock value is still there. But I feel like it's kind of unfair because we're a little biased in this one. But I mean, I'm interested. If you guys are listening to this, let us know in the comments for sure.
Sure. I mean, in 2018, UMBC won by 20. That game wasn't close. This game, Purdue had a chance to win with 55 seconds left. I think Laura was at the line or something like that, and they were down 3 or whatever. Like that, you felt that for all 40 minutes. At the end of the UMBC, at least for me, I was sort of resigned to the fact that this was happening and we were going to lose. And it sucks to be number one. At least Purdue's not the first team ever that's done it. But for me, it's sort of just shocking. I think that's the best way to describe it.
Well, we're at the 12:30 mark. We have a lot more to talk about, which we will get to on Monday. We still have the entire round of 32 ahead of us. Do you have anything else, any other points to bring up just regarding Fairleigh Dickinson or Purdue?
Good luck with Memphis or FAU to Fairleigh Dickinson. Hopefully Tobin Anderson. I cannot wait to see what Tobin Anderson comes up with from a coaching perspective when he attacks those two teams.
I could totally see Fairleigh Dickinson coming out flat, but because I remember very vividly when 16-seeded UMBC played either an 8 or a 9-seeded Kansas State, and it was probably the worst game of basketball overall that I've ever watched. And
so I would agree with that, but like we said before, UMBC had an incredible shooting night.
I'm talking about when UMBC
no, against Virginia. I mean, like this was not a. I don't think Fairleigh Dickinson played their best game offensively.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what interests me. That's what intrigues me.
All right. Well, like I keep saying, we will get to all of that. Just needed this emergency podcast out of the way because, man, we have the shock value here, and it's hard to wrap my head around it. But now Virginia has company, UMBC has company. It's quite amazing. That will do it for today's episode of the CBB Review Studio Podcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and take care.